Hello everybody, I am doing a card review too, so it's always good to keep a record of your predictions before the meta evolves. So, later on, sometimes down the road, I can point back to this and said, hey, I predicted it all along, and I would have proof as opposed to all these other people who are Nostradamus and have no evidence of their predictions before the new meta hit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a very, very fast look at some of the expected values and the predicted metagame meta decks that will come out of this expansion. And I don't want to be too verbose because I'm sure other people rant on about each of these cards. So let's do this. Let's do a quick and dirty review of the cards coming of these expansions. Before we take the theme of the expansion is golems and arcanysts. So most of the decks, pretty much all the decks, the only decks that will come out of this expansion from expansion cards would be golem and arcanyst decks. So before we take a look at how strong each of these cards are, we have to kind of judge them based on how well they fit in with what we have ready, golem and arcanyst cards. So before we look at these cards, we have to look at what golem and arcanyst cards we have ready that work with them. So real quick, these are the golem cards. There are no factional golems, and the only golem cards that you see out of these, the only golem cards that you see that are strong is really none of them. The only golem cards that are good right now is golem metallurgist. Any other golem cards, it's fairly suboptimal. Now, Zooch already played golem decks before, and the results is it's below average. Even though he's won quite a string of games on the top of S rank, the only strong card that I see in the current golem factional cards is one, and that speeds up other golems. So for golem decks to be viable post expansion, the golem cards that they print will have to be extremely good. Now let's take a look at arcanyst. Arcanyst has many more cards, more playable cards than golems, and their effects are much more powerful. The arcanyst card that will really tie a deck together, the golem metallurgist equivalent is abve mage, which is very, very powerful. One of the strongest infinite value generating minions in the game. Now, arcanyst decks, unlike golem decks, have in the past been top tier decks before, in Songhai mainly. And Wicked Flux actually still plays in arcanyst Songhai decks. Well, it's not consistent, but if it draws abve saged, it's very hard to deal with. It has some very good matchups against factions that doesn't have defenses against burn or good silences. Now, arcanyst cards are much stronger in the late game. I see Archon Spellbinder being semi-playable in the future. abve sage, a very playable card, but arcanyst cards are weak in the early game, and there's no strong 2-drops that's playable. Lightbender is also a playable card just for the synergy, and is a good tech card. And the difference between arcanyst and golem is that arcanyst also have a strong 2-drop in Chakra Avatar, but this is a Songhai exclusive. Foreign's Magi is pretty decent too. So arcanyst before the expansion is looking to be quite a bit better than golems ready. Before we look at the factional cards, let's look at the neutral cards to see the type of cards that will synergize with, that will fill the gaps of the factional cards. Since there wasn't many factional cards released this expansion. So Celebrant is a golem, and this is really a powerful card. I would rate this card a 5 out of 5. The effect, creating a mana spring and a tile nearby, it's so powerful. This I see as an auto-include card in every deck post-expansion. This is much, much better than Healing Mystic well, not every deck. In some fast decks, the mana tile is not very viable, but in any deck that wants to curve to a 5 mana minion, this card is invaluable. But Celebrant, 5 out of 5. Goalie, a 3 mana 3/4 that can be any tribe it wants. But I don't believe this card can be brought back from the dead. And for that reason, it's not that good. I don't think it's that good. I'll give this a 2 out of 5. Feralu is another card that will give +1/+1 to any tribal cards that you have. Now this is what is considered an infinite value minion. However, the body is only 5/3, and you can't really place it next to the enemy. So I'll consider this another fairly average card. It's 3 out of 5. Loreweaver and Arcanyst, that 4/5 Arcanyst that gives you a copy of a card that you draw. Now, the caveat with this card is that you cannot replace, does not count as a draw. So this card doesn't have immediate value necessarily unless you play maybe a First Wish or a Sphere of Darkness to go with it. And for that reason, and with the 2/5 body, which is a below average body, even though this is an infinite value minion, I don't think this card is that fantastic. I'll give it a 3 out of 5 just because it's an infinite value minion. I wouldn't consider this a below average card. Boulder Breacher is a golem that's a 5/5 with a bond enemy cannot counterattack this turn. Now, the effect is good enough, and to pay for the effect, this Boulder Breacher loses only around 2 mana of stats. No, 4 mana of stats to pay for the effect. But to be honest, this card is, I think, fairly average, even if you manage to get it off. When you're trading, well, most decks in this game, you don't even want to trade. You want to just, if you're ever ahead on board, you just want to go face. This card is only good when you're on an even board scenario or when you're ahead. And for that reason, 3 out of 5. Blue Conjurer, a 5 mana 4/6 arcanyst. Whenever you cast a spell, put a random arcanyst in your action bar. Now this is an above average card because a struggle of arcanyst decks is that after you play a bunch of spells, you run out of cards. But with a blue Conjurer, you can refill your hand perhaps very fast. If you're Songhai, you play a bunch of 1 mana, 0 mana spells. Now, the best card to come out of this expansion, and one of the 3 cards I've rated as 5 out of 5, would be Trinity Wing. And I think this, along with Celebrant, is the real card that will tie together Arcanyst that will make and perhaps make Arcanyst decks OP. If this affects procs, you have a huge advantage. A 5 mana 4/4 with flying is already pretty good. The body is alright. The effect, 3 cards, 3 1 mana cards. This is you've almost won the game at this point. If you play this card as Songhai and you get the 3 spell and you have let's say a Chakra Avatar on board, that's pretty much a won game. It's going to be so hard to deal with. And the cards itself, the 3 spells that it gives you, is good by itself. So Trinity Wing, a 5 out of 5. If Arcanyst decks become viable, I would imagine Trinity Wing being a large contributor to it. Grimes is a 6 mana 3/3. Opening and Dying Wish is summon a random minion nearby. Now, this can be structures, it can be golems, it can be even mechs. And from what people are saying about this card, it's probably not that good. Now, if this card becomes viable, then it would be horrific. Like, the RNG swing from this card is so high. It can either give you an EMP, a 10/10 minion, and Dragon Ball Golems, or it can give you a 2/2 in Helm of Mechazor. If this card becomes viable, oh man, I fear for the future of this game. And last neutral, EMP. 7 mana golem that dispels every minion and general and destroy all artifacts. Now, this is another... I mean, when this card was first revealed, a lot of people freaked out about it, saying that it's going to oppress certain factions or not. But you have to remember, compare this card to Lightbender. It does pretty much the same thing, in that like boards and duelists almost never extends past 1 or 2 minions on each side. And when there's only 1 or 2 minions on the board, a Lightbender would do the job just fine. And Lightbender even dispels Creep Toggle, whereas EMP doesn't. The EMP I see as a 7-mana tech card to specifically tech against maybe Vitruvian or Artifact factions. And a 7-mana tech card is just not that good. In a Golem deck, however, I see this to be a very viable Golem deck that will tie up the end game of Golems. But overall, I don't think this gives Golems as much power as Trinity Wing gives Arcanysts. So looking into neutrals, I feel like Arcanysts are way ahead. The thing with Celebrant is that Celebrant is so good that Celebrant will be played in Arcanyst decks too, and perhaps Celebrant would even do better in an Arcanyst deck than in the Golem decks, if only Arcanyst becomes viable. Moving on. So this is a state of mind that we're gonna go with. We have seen all the non-factional Golem and Arcanyst in the game, and with that, I'm gonna make predictions on how viable each of these factional Golem or Arcanyst decks will be. Looking at Lionar, I think Lionar is the second faction to benefit the most from Golems, and considering that, I don't think Golems will be that great in Lionar. Let's look at each individual cards. Warblade seems to be a fairly average minion, and in a Golem deck, it's alright. It's not great. It's really competing with the best 2-drops in the game in Windblade Adept and Tigers, so it's not great. So Pontif, another probably average card. Give your Golems +2 attack. To play a Golem deck in Lionar, you have to play a lot of the neutral Golems, because just the neutral expansion cards is not enough to fill out the deck. I mean, there are no... So, I mean, what are you going to give +2 attack to? Boulder Breaker? You're going to give +2 attack to the pre-expansion 4/6? This card is actually fairly hard to make work, because you can't play it. It's not a great card on curve, because 4-mana 4/3s don't typically survive that long, and it's also competing a lot with the current 3-drops. So this I see as another average card. And Peacekeeper to round up the Lionar late game, and Peacekeeper is just suffered the same problems as any other late game minions that doesn't have a immediate strong impact. The Peacekeeper is just going to eat a removal, and it's going to not do very well. So overall, Peacekeeper I'll even give it a below average status, 2 out of 5. The other cards, Golden Vitriol and Live Coil, they're both terrible. Golden Vitriol is just a worse Sunriser. Sunriser even applies an effect in an AoE and can target where you hit, whereas Golden Vitriol is random, so that's why it's bad. Life Coil is a worse Divine Bond. Divine Bond isn't even run 3 of in the current Divine Bond decks, and Life Coil can only be considered as good as a secondary Divine Bond if you want more than 3 Divine Bonds, and you don't even want those. So Life Coil, another 1 out of 5. Moving on to Songhai. Songhai I see as a faction that will benefit the most from Arcanyst. So let's look at how strong these Arcanyst cards are. However, Arcanyst cards seems to be pretty complete on the 4-mana slot. So Kindling is another 4-mana card to compete with 4 Winds Magi, and Albi Sage is going to have a tough time. So I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Sparrowhawk is competing with Songhai factionals in Lantern Fox and the 3/2 with range attack, and the Pando Seal. So with all this competition, can it really beat out all those cards? It's going to be really tough to. I'll say below average status, but maybe a 3 out of 5 in Arcanyst decks. Joseki is unplayable. Bangle of Blinding Strike has a lot of potential in an artifact-based Songhai decks, or even with in the deck with the backstab functionality. But that archetype is not currently being played right now. So let's not make too many hypothetical. I'll give this a 3 out of 5 though. because I can see this being a good card in the future. Calligrapher is a 7-mana 3/7, which is with Rush, which is pretty good because Revenant is a good card, and this card has 3 less attack than Revenant and 1 more health. But the effect, so let's see if the effect is as good as the Revenant effects. Whenever this minion attacks, put 3 Songhai spells in your action bar at the end of the turn. I think that the effect is spectacular, and this really helps Songhai curve out their late game. And with 6 mana Zendo and 7 mana Calligrapher, and even if your hand is empty after you play the Calligrapher, you'll have a full hand, and you'll be well on pace to killing your opponent on the turn afterwards. So Calligrapher, I think, is a great card. 4 out of 5. Looking at Vitruvian, I think Vitruvian Golems is not gonna work out well. So considering that, Dreamshaper, Windstriker, and Sirrocco, I'll give 3 out of 5s. They're fairly average power wise, even in the Golem decks. Sirrocco I consider average because late game, you can't play this on curve. If you curve out 2, 3, 4 Sirrocco, that's not that fantastic because it involves playing a card like Windstriker, and Windstriker is just not good. Windstriker is a 1/4 with flying. Even with flying, you wouldn't even play a 2 mana 1/4, so the compression cost for Windstriker is not so high. And Dreamshaper, it's a golem that's with only 2/2 of stats, so you can't play. It's not great when played turn 1 either. So if you curve out turn 1 Dreamshaper, turn 2 Windstriker, into turn 3 Sirrocco, like you're already massively behind on the board. The only way to come back is if you play Sirroccos over and over again, because it scales with itself. But I don't see that strategy working out too well because the Skyrock Golems is weak to AoE. So all the Golems for Vitruvian, I'll give a 3 out of 5. I don't see Golems working out for Vet. Thunderclap is a 4 mana artifact that resummons any minions that you destroyed. I consider this card to be not that good. It's people. I feel like people are overestimating the cards they can pull out of this. You have to actually attack into a minion to get value of this. Attacking into a minion usually means, right, as Vitruvian usually means that minion already walked up to you and attacked you. So that minion was able to do twice this attack and damage, and that usually ends the game if it's a high value minion, which is the exact type of minion you want to kill with Thunderclap. And for that reason, it's probably not going to see much play. 2 out of 5. And lastly, in the Diamond in the Rough, the only gem Vitruvian got out of expansion would be Blood of Air, because Vitruvian lacks a hard removal. So being the only viable hard removal in the entire faction, this is going to see a lot of play. 4 out of 5, exceptional card, but not, OP level, because paying 5 mana to remove a minion, it's mediocre. This card makes Dark Transformation and Abyssian look like shit, though. And moving on to Abyssian. Now, Abyssian, I don't see playing into the Arcanyst archetype, because Abyssian have trouble drawing cards. Like, Rite of the Undervolt is a good card to play if you have no cards in hand. But if you play it on curve, in a fast deck, it almost instantly causes you to lose the game already. So if you make the assumption like I have, like I just don't see from the current card pool Abyssian Arcanyst being a very viable archetype, and for that reason, Death Knell would be an average card. Nuetral would be a below average card because a 5 mana 5/1 is terrible, especially against Cassiva. And Nocturne, it's a fairly average card, but I don't see any situation where the effects is that good. I mean, you can get off an extra Wraithling in a turn, but so what? That's just 1 more damage. So overall, Nocturne, 3 out of 5, Death Knell, 3 out of 5, and Nuetral, 2 out of 5. Those combined together, it's still fairly average, so I don't see this being a viable archetype. If they nerf Revenants, though, maybe Vitruvian will have to play Arcanyst. Blood Echoes. This card is terrible. 1 out of 5. We already have a card that does the same thing, and that's not played. And this is a win more card. And win more cards are almost never good. And Blood of Echoes would look bad as a card if not Vivician also have the Releaser, which is one of the worst cards I've ever seen. This is just a weak keep. This is a worse keeper effect that you can't even control when it breaks because it's an artifact. Moving on to Magmar. Now, Magmar, I feel like, is a faction that benefits a lot out of the Golem synergies because every Golem card in Magmar is a playable card. Ragebinder, I'll give 3 out of 5 because, I mean, 3-mana minions usually is never that good, but Ragebinder is a fairly alright card because it heals 3 to your general. So turn 2 after you attack, you can heal your general back to full. What's really great about the expansion is Lavaslasher, a 4-mana 4/9 with an immediate effect to battle a minion of your choosing. This is a very OP card. I'll give this card a 5 out of 5. I see this played in every single Magmar deck from now on, regardless if it's Golem or not. And this is really the card that will push Magmar into viability. Moving on, Juggernaut, 8 mana 4/10 that spawns an egg every damage that it takes. This is actually a great card. It's the good card. What makes this card strong is that it's very hard to cleanly remove this card. If you flash this card out, it's going to make 2 eggs and give a 4/8 body. Your opponent can't even hard remove. If your opponent hard removes it, they still have to deal with the eggs somehow, and the eggs might be out of range. And if they AoE the eggs, the Juggernaut effect activates, and it just makes more eggs. So they have to silence the Juggernaut and then AoE to clear the eggs. So this card will always takes a 2 for 2. So if you flash this out, I think most of the time your opponent just won't answer it. This is one of the hardest card to answer in the entire game. And for that reason, 4 out of 5. Just because even though it's so strong, it's still tough to get to the late game. And the 2 remaining cards, Godhammer and Cascading Rebirth. Godhammer, 1 out of 5. It's in a zoo deck, it might work. If maybe a Starhorn Flood deck, it might be good. But it's not an immediate effect, and the effect is not very powerful. To make this better than Greater Fortitude, you have to have 3 minions on board, which is tough to do. Cascading Rebirth, destroy random flame minion to summon a minion 1 stronger. This is just worth, like, whatever minion you want to summon from this, you just want to play 1 more of that minion. And the biggest problem that you cannot reliably get the minion that you want. If this gives me a Lavaslasher every time I use it on a 4-drop, I will play this card, but it doesn't because it's random. So below average card, 2 out of 5. And lastly, Vanar, Mana Deathgrip. I'm one of the few players in the game that plays Crispy Wisp, and this card is worse than Crispy Wisp. You're not guaranteed to proc this turn 1 or turn 2, and it's not a minion, so it cannot contest mana tiles. I just don't see this card. This card is an average card. It's alright. I can see it seeing play ready, but you have to remember that in a ramp list, adding this card in addition to Crispy Wisp would mean you have less room, even less room than currently for late game minions. Ice Shadow Gauntlet, 1 out of 10. 1 out of 5, because currently not a lot of shit gets frozen. And to freeze something, it costs you a card. So to clear something cleanly with Ice Shadow Gauntlet, you need to play a card and then equip this, so you're using 2 for 1 ready. And that's always not that good. Circulus, though, it's an average card. The main problem with Circulus is that if you play this turn 1, turn 2, you don't want to play spells. Turn 2, you want to curve up to a 4-mana card. So, average. 3 out of 5. Kindred Hunter, I'll give a 2 out of 5 because this is just we used to have a card called Fenrir Warmaster, and this card is not as good as Fenrir Warmaster because of the conditional bond, and 3 mana makes it very awkward to play. Lastly, Ghost Seraphim. This is I actually think this is a good card because the amount of tempo that you gain. It's almost as if, this is a very strong tempo card. But Vanar, the biggest problem with Vanar is that Vanar has trouble drawing cards. So playing this would cost you yeah, playing this and playing a card every turn is not realistic for more than like 1 or 2 turns, even if this stays alive. So if you play this away from your opponent, it's going to be very hard to use. And also, I looked in the Vanar spell repository, and Vanar does not have objectively good, just generically good late game spell that it can play. The best thing that it can do is Winter's Wake, but then you have to play walls and stuff, and that's just not very good. I think this card, because there's no strong Vanar spells that you can just randomly play on turn 7, and I don't think Arcanyst Vanar will turn out that well either. I'll give this card a 3 out of 5. And that's it for individual card review.